In the final seconds of the audio, you can hear his breathing change, the faint rustle of fabric, and a whisper that was never meant to be recorded. And somewhere between those sounds is the precise moment a man unknowingly documented his own murder. A chilling truth that would only reveal itself long after the recording stopped, long after his body was found, and long after the killer believed every trace had been erased. This true crime story begins on an ordinary autumn evening in 2016 in the quiet outskirts of a mid-sized American city. The kind of place where streets empty early and neighbors recognize each other's cars. A place that felt too uneventful for something so dark to unfold, and the man at the center of it all was Daniel Harper, a 34-year-old freelance videographer known for documenting everyday life through his camera and voice recorder, a habit he had developed years earlier to capture ideas for documentaries that never quite came to life. Friends describing him as meticulous, observant, and privately paranoid. Someone who trusted machines more than people. And on the night that would become his last, Daniel was working on what he thought would be nothing more than background audio for a new project about urban isolation, unaware that his fascination with reality was about to trap him inside a nightmare far more real than he could imagine. Daniel lived alone in a small rented house near an industrial district, surrounded by warehouses and dimly lit streets where security cameras blinked but rarely watched. And while he had no known enemies, his recent behavior concerned those close to him. Text messages sent at odd hours, vague references to being followed, and a growing obsession with recording everything: conversations, footsteps, even the hum of his refrigerator. Details that later investigators would replay again and again, searching for meaning hidden beneath static and breath. Because when Daniel failed to show up for a scheduled client meeting 2 days later, days later, the unease turned into dread, and by the time police entered his home, the recording device lay on his desk, still powered on, its memory card holding the most damning evidence the case would ever produce. The crime scene itself was deceptively calm, no signs of forced entry, no overturned furniture, just Daniel's body discovered in a narrow hallway leading to his bedroom. A single blunt force injury to the head, delivered with enough precision to suggest intent rather than rage. And immediately detectives faced a contradiction that would define the investigation. A violent death inside a space that showed almost no struggle. As if the victim had known his killer, as if he had let them inside willingly, and when the coroner estimated time of death, it matched almost exactly with the final timestamp on Daniel's recorder, an unsettling coincidence that quickly became the case's most haunting pillar. The audio itself began mundanely, Daniel narrating his thoughts, describing the quiet outside, commenting on distant traffic and the creak of his floorboards, his voice calm and analytical, until subtle changes emerged, pauses growing longer, his breathing uneven, and then a sound that should never have been there. Footsteps that were not his own. Faint at first, almost swallowed by static, and as detectives listened, they realized something terrifying. Daniel noticed those sounds too, because his tone shifted, cautious curiosity giving way to restrained fear, but he never panicked, never shouted, and never confronted whoever else was in the house, instead continuing to record, as if documentation itself could protect him. The crime's progression unfolded entirely through sound, a door opening softly, a low murmur barely audible, and Daniel whispering a question to someone whose reply remains unintelligible, even after advanced audio enhancement. And this is where the case transforms from unsettling to horrifying. Because what follows is not a struggle, but a conversation, one-sided yet intimate, suggesting familiarity, trust, or manipulation, ending abruptly with a loud impact, the sound of Daniel collapsing, and then silence broken only by the recorder continuing to run, capturing the echo of a life ending without a scream. Investigators pored over Daniel's past, his work, his relationships, searching for suspects who might have had access to his home, former partners, clients, acquaintances met through online forums dedicated to independent filmmakers, and each lead raised more questions than answers, because everyone described Daniel as cautious, sometimes excessively so, someone who would never open his door to a stranger late at night, yet the evidence suggested he had done exactly that. The investigation hit its first major obstacle when the recording revealed no clear voice other than Daniel's. The intruder's presence inferred rather than confirmed, forcing detectives to rely on circumstantial evidence. Security camera footage from nearby warehouses that showed vehicles passing, but nothing conclusive. and phone records that revealed Daniel had received a call minutes before the footsteps began. A call from a prepaid phone that could not be traced, and it was this call that introduced a chilling theory that Daniel had been lured, summoned by someone he recognized, into lowering his guard just long enough to seal his fate. As days turned into weeks, public attention grew, the media dubbing it one of the most disturbing true crime cases of the decade, emphasizing the psychological horror of a man capturing his own final moments without understanding their significance, and listeners around the world speculated endlessly, replaying the audio, isolating noises, slowing down breaths, searching for hidden confessions within the static, a grim form of crowdsourced investigation that yielded countless theories but little truth. Police made a breakthrough months later when an audio analyst noticed something previously overlooked: a rhythmic clicking sound beneath the footsteps, consistent with a specific type of work boot manufactured for industrial environments, narrowing the suspect pool to individuals employed in warehouses near Daniel's home. And among them was a man named Eric Sloan, a maintenance worker who had interacted with Daniel weeks earlier after responding to a noise complaint Daniel filed about a nearby building, a brief encounter that Daniel had never mentioned to friends, but which placed Eric within both physical and temporal proximity to the crime. When questioned, Eric denied visiting Daniel's home again, claiming he had no reason to, yet surveillance records contradicted him, showing his presence in the area the night of the murder. And under pressure, his alibi began to unravel, revealing inconsistencies that pointed toward premeditation rather than coincidence. But even then, the case lacked a smoking gun, until investigators compared Eric's speech patterns to the muffled sounds captured in the recording, a risky but compelling analysis that suggested a match strong enough to warrant further scrutiny. The true turning point came when police searched Eric's residence and found a secondhand audio recorder identical to Daniel's, along with deleted files recovered by forensic experts, including rehearsed monologues eerily similar to Daniel's own recording style, suggesting obsession, imitation, and perhaps envy, a disturbing insight into a suspect who may have studied his victim long before the fatal encounter. And when confronted with this evidence, Eric confessed partially, admitting to being in the house but claiming the death was accidental, a narrative destroyed by the precision of the injury and the calculated nature of the encounter captured in sound. At trial, the audio recording became the case's most powerful witness, played in a silent courtroom where jurors listened not to screams or violence, but to the quiet intrusion of death into an ordinary life. And despite defense arguments about interpretation and coincidence, the jury returned a guilty verdict, sentencing Eric Sloan to life imprisonment. Yet even with legal closure, the case refused to settle comfortably into history because questions remained about motive, about why Daniel never resisted, about whether he sensed the danger too late or trusted the wrong voice at the wrong moment. Public reaction was intense and divided, some viewing the recording as a warning about privacy and obsession, others as proof that true crime often hides in plain sight, embedded in routine moments we never think to question. And online communities continued to analyze the audio years later, claiming to hear phrases investigators dismissed, turning Daniel's final recording into a digital ghost that refuses to rest. Today, the case of Daniel Harper stands as one of the most chilling entries in dark case files, a reminder that sometimes the most damning evidence is created by the victim himself, not out of fear but out of habit, curiosity, and a belief that recording reality could somehow control it, a belief that cost him everything. And as the final seconds of the audio fade into silence, one question still lingers in the darkness. Did Daniel realize the truth before the final blow, or did understanding die with him in that quiet hallway? This has been a true crime story where the line between observer and victim vanished completely, and if this case unsettled you, if it made you question how much of your own life you unknowingly document, then you already understand why these stories matter, because darkness does not always announce itself. Sometimes it whispers, so tell us in the comments. Do you believe Daniel knew he was recording his own murder, or was the truth hidden from him until the very end? And if you want more chilling narratives like this, more true crime stories that haunt long after the screen goes dark, subscribe to Dark Case Files and step back into the shadows with us.